Have you ever wondered why certain people seem to drift away from your life, no matter how much you try to hold on? Or why, when you begin to step into the person you are meant to be, there are those, even among your own family, who resist, who doubt, who subtly or openly discourage you? Not every bond is meant to last forever. Not every voice that speaks to you has your best interest at heart. And sometimes it is not rejection, but divine protection that causes the distance between you and another. The weight of certain relationships. A family member may love you, but love is not always expressed in ways that nurture the soul. Some love you in the way they know best, through control, criticism, or discouragement masked as concern. But God does not intend for love to be a weight that drowns you. He intends for it to be a foundation upon which you grow. If you find yourself feeling drained, guilty, or small every time you are around someone, it is not mere emotion. The subtle resistance to your growth. Notice the pattern. When you speak of your dreams, are you met with encouragement or dismissal? Does this person celebrate your victories or find ways to minimize them? A soul that belongs to God's purpose will always encounter opposition, often from the places least expected. Growth is uncomfortable for those who do not wish to change. And so, rather than rise with you, some will try to keep you where they are. The barrier to your becoming. One of the greatest dangers to a growing soul is a stagnant environment. Some family members remember who you were, not who you are becoming. They remind you of past failures, not present transformation. They hold on to a version of you that no longer exists because it makes them comfortable. But comfort is not the goal. Growth is. And if they will not grow with you, they will attempt to keep you from growing at all. The protection found in distance. You may wonder, why is this relationship breaking apart? Why is this person pulling away? Or why do I feel uneasy when I am near them? What if the answer is not rejection, but divine intervention? God removes people from your life when their presence is a hindrance to your calling. If their absence brings peace, clarity, or newfound strength, take heed. This is not loss, but grace. When love becomes a chain, love, when pure, liberates. It does not suffocate. Some family bonds are built on guilt, obligation, and manipulation rather than true care. If you feel trapped, constantly seeking approval yet never receiving it, it is time to step back and ask, is this love or is this control? God does not bind you to relationships that drain your spirit. He calls you to relationships that refine it. The call to rise above. There is a truth about spiritual growth that many overlook. Elevation requires separation. Some relationships can only function when you remain at a certain level. The moment you begin to rise, they resist, they question, they criticize, and sometimes they leave. But do not grieve the absence of those who could not walk with you. Do not hold on to relationships that God Himself is breaking apart. If you notice these signs, take comfort in knowing you are not being abandoned. You are being protected. You are not losing family. You are gaining clarity. For God's plan for you is higher, greater, and fuller than the confines of human relationships. And those who are meant to walk with you will not chain you to the past, but will help you step into the future. Walk boldly, trust fully, and when God removes, know that He also replaces with love, with purpose, and with people who will call you higher. Family is often considered the foundation of our existence, the first connection we experience in this world. From childhood, we are taught that family is meant to love, protect, and nurture us. Yet, What happens when a family member becomes a burden rather than a source of strength? What if their presence in our life brings more exhaustion than encouragement, more self-doubt than confidence? Not all love is expressed in ways that uplift the soul. Some people care, but their care is heavy. They worry, but their worry suffocates. They advise, but their advice diminishes. Love should not feel like a chain around your neck, nor should it press upon your shoulders like an unbearable weight. True love strengthens, but distorted love weakens. You may have noticed that every interaction with a particular family member leaves you feeling drained. Perhaps it's the way they speak, words wrapped in concern but laced with doubt. Perhaps it's their tendency to recall your past failures more than your present growth. Or maybe it's the way they make you question yourself, not through direct insults, but through subtle implications that you are not enough. Some family members love you in a way that keeps you small. They love the version of you that they can manage, the version that aligns with their expectations. When you begin to grow, change, and reach for something greater, they resist. Not necessarily out of malice, but out of fear. Your transformation unsettles them because it forces them to confront their own stagnation. The weight of these relationships is often disguised as duty. You feel obligated to endure because it's family. You silence your discomfort because they mean well. But intentions, no matter how good, do not erase the impact of their actions. A heavy heart cannot thrive. A mind filled with doubt cannot dream. A soul weighed down by guilt cannot soar. It is not selfish to acknowledge that some relationships hinder rather than help. It is not unkind to recognize that certain interactions leave you more exhausted than encouraged. And it is not a betrayal to protect your peace, even when the one disrupting it is family. God did not design love to be a burden. If a relationship consistently drains you, leaving you feeling smaller rather than stronger, then it is time to ask, is this love serving me, or is it suffocating me? The subtle resistance to your growth. Growth is a natural part of life. Every living thing is designed to evolve, to expand, to reach for something greater. Yet, when a person begins to change, especially in ways that elevate them beyond what is familiar, resistance often follows. And sometimes that resistance comes from the people closest to them. Family members, the ones who have known you the longest, may struggle to accept the new version of you, not because they despise you, but because your growth challenges the stability of their world. When you begin to dream beyond the limits they have set, when you begin to change in ways they did not anticipate, it unsettles them. One of the earliest signs of resistance is found in conversation. Pay attention to how a family member reacts when you share your aspirations. Do they encourage you, or do they dismiss your words with skepticism? Do they respond with curiosity and support, or with doubt and warnings of failure? Resistance does not always come in the form of open criticism. Sometimes it is a quiet withdrawal of support, a lukewarm response, a half-hearted smile when you share good news. It is the subtle shift in tone, the hesitation before they acknowledge your success. It is the way they change the subject when the conversation turns toward your progress. Some will resist your growth because it reminds them of their own stagnation. If you are breaking free from limiting beliefs, it forces them to confront the fact that they are still bound by theirs. If you are stepping into your potential, it highlights the ways in which they have settled for less. Instead of rising with you, they may try to pull you back down to where they feel safe. They may remind you of past failures. They may say things like, "You tried this before and it didn't work." Or, "People like us don't succeed in that kind of thing." They may bring up old mistakes, not as a lesson, but as a way to plant doubt in your mind. At times, resistance comes wrapped in concern. "I just don't want you to get hurt. What if it doesn't work out? Maybe you should be more realistic." These words may be spoken with sincerity, but their effect is the same. They create hesitation, uncertainty, and fear. The most painful form of resistance is when someone who once believed in you begins to distance themselves. When your success is no longer celebrated, when your achievements are met with silence, when the people who once stood by you now seem uncomfortable in your presence, you may find that conversations become strained, that old connections feel forced, that there is an invisible wall between you and them, built not by anger, but by the unspoken reality that you are growing in different directions. This is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is evidence that you are changing, that you are stepping into a version of yourself that not everyone is ready to accept. And while this realization may be painful, it is also necessary. Growth will always be met with resistance, but the voices that doubt you should never be louder than the calling that drives you forward. The barrier to your becoming. There is a version of you that exists beyond who you are today, a version that has grown, evolved, and stepped fully into the life meant for you. But not everyone in your life is ready for that version. Some will cling to the image of who you used to be, not out of malice, but because it makes them comfortable. Family members who have known you for years may struggle to accept your growth. They remember the times when you were uncertain, hesitant, or dependent on them. They recall your mistakes, your flaws, your weaknesses. And instead of seeing how far you have come, they remind you of where you once were. This resistance is not always loud. It can be as subtle as a dismissive comment, a raised eyebrow, a nostalgic remark about the old you. It can come in the form of jokes that undermine your progress, laughter at your ambitions, or reminders of your past failures disguised as concern. Some family members do not resist your growth because they dislike you. They resist it because your transformation challenges their perception of the world. If you, someone they have known closely, are changing, then it forces them to question why they have stayed the same, and rather than face that discomfort, they try to keep you from moving forward. They may encourage you to stay where you are, not because they wish you harm, but because they fear losing the role they once played in your life. A parent who was once your guide may struggle with the idea that you now navigate your own path. A sibling who once protected you may feel uneasy as you learn to stand on your own. Some family members need you to remain the same so they can maintain their place in your story. If you change, their role changes. If you rise, they must either rise with you or be left behind. The most painful realization is that those who resist your becoming are not always enemies. They are often the ones who have loved you deeply, who have shared your past, who have walked with you through life's hardest moments. But love, when tied to control, can become a barrier instead of a bridge. You may find that as you grow, you no longer fit into the spaces where you once belonged. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly now feel strained. Interactions that once felt natural now seem forced. The more you step into who you are meant to be, the more evident it becomes that not everyone will step with you. A family member may unconsciously hold you to an identity that no longer serves you. They may resist your ambitions, not because they do not believe in you, but because they fear what your success means for their own life. They may discourage you, not out of cruelty, but out of their own unspoken insecurities. Growth requires you to recognize when a relationship is keeping you small, when the words spoken over you no longer align with your future, when the comfort of the past becomes a prison rather than a foundation. The weight of unspoken expectations, the silent pressure to remain who you once were, the resistance that comes not from hatred but from familiarity, all of these can stand in the way of your becoming. But the call to grow will always be louder than the fear of change, the protection found in distance. Not every person who exits your life is meant to stay. Not every absence is a loss. Sometimes what feels like rejection is actually divine protection. The distance that grows between you and a family member may not be an accident. It may be an act of grace, shielding you from something that could hinder your purpose. There are times when relationships become strained, not because of conflict, but because of a shift in energy. You may notice that a family member no longer reaches out as much as they once did. Conversations that were once frequent become rare. The connection that once felt effortless now feels forced. At first, this distance may cause confusion. You may wonder what you did wrong, why things are different, or how to fix what seems to be unraveling. But what if the shift is not something to be repaired, but something to be understood? God removes people from our lives when their presence is no longer aligned with where we are going. Some relationships are seasonal. They serve a purpose for a time, but they are not meant to last forever. Holding on to someone who was only meant to be part of your past can prevent you from stepping into your future. There is a protection in separation that is not always immediately clear. Some people drain your energy in ways you do not recognize until they are no longer in your life. You may not realize the weight of a relationship until you feel the lightness that comes with its absence. Pay attention to how you feel when certain people are around. If you find yourself constantly anxious, on edge, or emotionally exhausted after every interaction, that is not a coincidence. If their words leave you doubting yourself more than believing in yourself, that is not an accident. These are signs that the connection is no longer serving you, and distance is being created for a reason. Sometimes the people closest to us carry silent envy. Not everyone who smiles at you is happy for you. Some people celebrate you only when you remain at a level they are comfortable with. The moment you begin to rise, their support fades. Their words become colder, and their presence becomes more distant. If a family member's absence brings you unexpected peace, that is not something to ignore. If you feel more at ease when they are not around, if your mind is clearer and your spirit is lighter, that is a revelation, not a coincidence. There is wisdom in knowing when to stop chasing after relationships that are slipping away. Not every door that closes is meant to be forced back open. If a person's role in your life is meant to change, no amount of effort will restore what was. Distance does not always mean the end of love. You can still care for someone and recognize that their presence is no longer beneficial to your growth. You can still hold memories with gratitude while understanding that their involvement in your life must change. The space that is created when someone leaves is not empty. It is an opening for something greater. When God removes, He replaces. When He separates, He prepares. And when He creates distance, it is not to harm you, but to protect you from what you cannot yet see. Do not mourn the absence of those who could not walk with you into your next season. What feels like loss is often the very thing making room for your greatest gain.